Okay.
Meeting is being live streamed. Okay. We are on. Cool.
Yeah, see it here, yeah.
So I'm going to turn it off here. And can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. And let me just see if people can hear us.
Oh, here we go. Okay, I see it. We have 4 people here.
And can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. And let me just see if people can hear us.
Oh, here we go. Okay, I see it. We have 4 people.
This is such a delay is funny. I just wrote if people can see us and hear us. I hope they can.
I can share it too.
And we have some interesting stuff to talk about. Let's just give ourselves a minute. You can share, Julie. Okay, we are heard and we are seen. Thank you.
Yay.
Awesome. So hello, everyone. We are going to be talking with Julie again today about astrology, but not Western tropical astrology. Julie, if you know or not, but Julie has left the tropical system of astrology for what she calls the real sky astrology. And if I quickly can give you guys like a little distinction what it is. So tropical astrology, Western astrology follows the seasons. So spring always starts at 0 degrees Aries, but over the time, because it doesn't use precession, it's just removed from the sky. So basically, yes, it follows the seasons, and seasons are always because from the perspective of Earth, I think that's one of the most important things. So that's why tropical astrology uses the seasons, because that's what's changeable, what's visible, that's what we can really see without having apps and so on. But astrology, as the name suggests, was supposed to also follow the stars, or be at least in dance with the stars, where Western astrology right now is very much removed from what's happening in the constellations. But sidereal astrology, which is also like Vedic astrology, Indian astrology, is a good example for sidereal astrology, follows the constellations and the stars, and it's much closer connected to what's actually visible in the skies. And then there's something that Julie calls the real sky astrology, or true sidereal astrology, which is very similar to sidereal astrology, but there is a big difference there, one big difference. Then in sidereal astrology, in Vedic astrology, we have 12 signs. Each sign takes 30 degrees on the ecliptic. And in true sidereal astrology, or the real sky astrology, we follow what actually is seen or visible, and the constellations are different sizes. Scorpio is very small compared to Virgo or Pisces, which are very large, have many more stars, and Sun, going through the ecliptic, spends more time in the constellation of Virgo, more than 30 days. So it's more than 30 degrees. And it spends only a couple of days in the sign of Scorpio, let's say. So that's the fastest I can do. And even if you guys didn't understand anything, we will be repeating it.
Again and again.
Again and again. And yeah, it would be lovely to, at some point actually to go out and look at the skies together, Julie, but We probably won't be able to do it in anytime soon together, at least, because we on different continents. But yeah, the astrology that Julie is using, let's call it the real sky astrology or the true sidereal astrology. We're going to be focused on this particular system today. So you can be surprised sometimes that the sign, your star sign that you know from the Western tropical astrology might be different to the system that we are going to be talking about today, because this system, as I said, it's kind of using the constellations and the stars as they are visible from Earth, rather than tropical, seasonal changes. Then the sun is moving through the zodiac. I don't know even how to explain it any clearer, because I'm still in the point, guys, that I'm researching it. So bear with us. Hi, Patrick. Hi, Peter. Hi, Anne. Cool. And how do I block people on?
I blocked one guy.
Oh yeah, exactly. How do you do it?
I just click on it and it will give you a little menu to say block,
cool.
report.
Okay.
So
thank you. All right, Julie. So we already talked with Julie.
Too bad you guys all missed the show.
So we are going to actually start, because I think it's going to be interesting for us, and it's going to be interesting for people who are listening or re-listening. We are coming towards the vernal equinox, and it's on the 20th this year, 20th of March. And this is cut from Julie's deck, Journey into Egypt Tarot, that, of course, most of you, I hope, know now that it's still available, and no, it's not out of print, and you can, guys, get it in two versions. Even one you can get from Julie still, the kind of original she published in 2013, but also it's available for anyone. You can get it on Printer Studio if you want, but it's going to be a little bit different format, right? It's going to be more like this longish, longer and narrower compared to what Julie has. And Julie's is, as you can see, more laminated than the version on the Printer Studio, sorry. But this vernal equinox card is so beautiful, Julie. I love it so much. So we have Sirius here with the dog star, and we have Orion's belt here, and it's just such a beautiful vision for the spring equinox and for the full card, and it's just wonderful. So this spring equinox in tropical astrology is in Aries, because it's always in Aries, right? But I think that's why you also felt a little bit disappointed with the seasonal astrology, because it feels a little bit like a time loop. You seem not to be evolving with the seasons in some way. Whereas when you think of precessions, the sun is actually, or the vernal equinox right now, 2000 years later, since the astrology started, the sun is rising in the constellation of Pisces. So this vernal equinox is in the constellation of Pisces, and the new moon that's coming a day after, which is also a very fascinating time, is also in Pisces when it comes to using astrology as constellational astrology. So Julie, can you share a little bit of information about it, like the moon in Pisces in your deck from Real Sky Astrology is this beautiful image, and this is the image for the new moon.
Right. Well, in ancient Egypt, the equinox was really a very important time, and it's the time when this year, especially because it's the new moon, we'll have a waxing sun and a waxing moon at the same time. And it's this time of year between the equinox of spring and the summer solstice when light is increasing. There's increasing light. And so that being a positive thing, having increasing light and growth, and the world coming back, or the the earth waking up and coming back, and rebirthing itself in, in the northern hemisphere.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Because in the southern, they
And
kind
I
of
mean,
opposite.
even in Egypt, in ancient Egypt, that would have been their harvest time, because they would grow their crops in what we would think of as the winter, because that was when the sun was less harsh. They would be actually going through harvest, and then they would be going through a time of almost desert-like conditions, and thinking, um, it, Egypt is turning back into desert. And then they would get um, to solstice, and then there would be the flood, and then everything would be reprieved again. But the equinox, for some reason, they marked this time when you see the Sphinx in next to the pyramids, the Sphinx is always facing east. It's always looking at the equinox sunrise that's facing perfectly at the equinox sunrise. So it's looking at something. And I get the impression, or there is the impression, that the age of that we're in is always the constellation that comes up and is visible at before sunrise. And that's where the whole age of Aquarius comes from, or the age of Pisces, the age of Aries. And so if we stay with Western astrology and look at it that way, it's always going to be the age of Pisces.
I mean, always
Always, forever. And the way that we got our Western astrology to begin with was from documents that were transcribed by Claudius Ptolemy, documents that he wrote about astronomy and astrology and precession, which the Egyptians knew about. And this is a 26-year cycle. And during that 26,000 year cycle, every 2,160 approximate years, depending on the constellation, but that's just an average. You could calculate it exactly by doing 72 years per degree, and every 2,160 approximate years, there's a new constellation that rises just before dawn, and they would watch that. And if you look at the gods that were worshipped during these different times, then you can see that there was definitely some attention paid to what the constellation was at equinox.
Yeah, and this is really interesting, Julie, because that's why I think we were laughing that with tropical astrology, it feels a little bit like this time loop, right? That it's always the same age in some way. I mean, we have progressions in Western astrology, but it doesn't really even touch the ages so much, even though we're heading towards the age of Aquarius. And in Western astrology, I think we're seeing these changes through planets changing signs from like all these earth signs into the air signs and so on. So you can kind of make the, associations, but this is just purely visible on like when you actually observe the sky and what rises on the vernal equinox. You can go out on 20th of March, and if you have visibility of any side, use astronomy app of any sort, and you will see when the sign is rising, like what constellation it's rising in. And it's fascinating to actually observe it and look at the sky and see the reflection of it in our, like on Earth, in our lives.
Yeah, you're not actually going to see Pisces because the sun is in Pisces. So what you are going to see is Aquarius at the horizon just before sunrise. And does that mean that we've already entered the age of Aquarius?
Is it showing the Aquarius constellation on the horizon?
It would, yes.
On the 20th?
Yes, but if you were technically looking at it with our technology, technically the sun, the Pisces is still just eking a little bit up out of the horizon. So
Yeah.
technically, if you want to look at it with scientific eyes, with the degrees in mathematics and our technology, it would still be in the age of Pisces. But the way that the Egyptians would have looked at it, they would have seen Aquarius, and it would have been the full-on Aquarius, and it would have been technically the age of Aquarius.
Oh, now you kind of, I know that we spoke about it before, but like I'm just thinking now, like I wanna like I
And
don't know
look,
if I'll be able to see it, but I would love to see it and see because there's different apps, and I was just curious, like how different apps would show. Because again, this is an information for like astrology freaks a little bit. So I hope maybe Patrick will appreciate, or Peter, or somebody who like loves astrology. I don't know who else of you guys who are watching it live appreciate this, but there's two ways in which we kind of see the
right.
movement of the planets, and I mean actually sun mostly, because that's what we kind of focusing on, but the ecliptic is like the pathway that we from perspective of Earth see in the sky, and the constellations that the sun is passing. These are the zodiac signs, right? And that's what we kind of see, because we don't see the whole Milky Way, we don't see the whole sky, we don't see every constellation that is, even though we know they're there. But we mostly, as astrologers specifically, also focused on the constellations that are visible, that the sun is passing, right? So there are 13 constellations actually that the sun is passing, that we see with naked eye from the perspective on Earth. And the one which is kind of not used, or we want to use it because it's a cool constellation.
And it's been extracted by Western culture.
Yeah, it's the
Fair.
serpent bearer, or the Imhotep, as usually call it from the Egyptian perspective. So because the moon actually today is we have the last quarter moon,
Right.
and it's in the sign of the Ophiuchus, or the serpent bearer constellation. Could you tell us a little bit of the mythology, or the meaning of this 13th constellation that we actually, the sun is passing through, but we're not really using it as a zodiacal sign?
Right. I think that maybe partially why the snake bearer was taken out, why Imhotep was taken out, or Ophiuchus was taken out, because it was so very Egyptian. And uh, Imhotep was the builder of the pyramids, the designer of the pyramids, and the person who brought medicine to Egypt. And when that happened is still like, when did that happen? His cult, there were cults to Imhotep well past after his lifetime, about 2,000 years before the Common Era. There were cults to Ophiuchus, to Imhotep. And Imhotep became Asclepius, and it became Jesus to the Coptics. So this 13th, this human being, the only human being that was put into the Zodiac. And I think we have to talk about, what is the Zodiac? The Zodiac, to the ancient Egyptians, were the stars of the south who would appear and disappear. And they became the stars that symbolized reincarnation. And those were the things that the Egyptians put the things in the sky that they wanted to come back. They wanted these things to return. And so they put Imhotep into the sky to make him immortal, so that they would always have his wisdom and bring it back to Egypt in time of need, and the time, because I think that the people who came to Egypt in the early days were escaping climate change, and they were coming because the place that they were living was becoming uninhabitable. And that there's evidence of that in the Sahara, in the places like Nabta Playa in the west, about 100 miles out from the Nile. There are stone circles out there where people were living, where they would follow the animals before they were settled. They would follow the animals to where the water supplies were. And as things dried out more and more, 8,000 years ago, or 8,000 BC, they started to travel farther and farther in and closer to the Nile. And so Imhotep became this person who brought all this wisdom from some other culture to Egypt and built all what we see today in this place that was settled. And then before this time, people were not in settlements. They were hunter-gatherers. And the farming, I feel the farming became like something they did because they wanted to recreate the place that they came from by planting the seeds that they had from the old places.
You know, the first time I've heard about Imhotep was when I was reading some essential oil book, and somebody mentions him as like the originator, you know, like, or like a god associated with the scent, with the healing properties of oils. This was the first time I heard Imhotep in this association of like oils and scent and, you know, healing. And Peter says here that like the end of Ice Age was an incredible time of transition for the Northern Hemisphere. Yeah. And there's this whole...
The word Hotep means peace. So his name has peace in it. So he came to bring peace. And I think, you know, this was a time, you know, there was a great upheaval, and now there was going to be peace settled into the Nile, like settling into the Nile. And they wanted to put him on the Zodiac ecliptic to make sure that he would return again and again.
I find it fascinating what you said, that they would put stuff that they wanted to come back, you know, they wanted to return. So that's why you used here like this, the Mother of Cups, that she is like a herbalist. She's collecting herbs, right? And here it's sharing like the energy with Scorpio also, because Ophiuchus and Scorpio, they would be kind of sharing the same space on the ecliptic. You would say one is above the other. At least that's how we, from our perspective, how they're visible. So can you say a little bit more about this card? Like what is she doing?
Okay. When you look at this, you can see the Eye of Horus down there, and she's got a little measure. It's for measuring, and the eye, each part of the eye is a different measurement, and they had a base 12 measurement. So the center of the eye is 1 cup, and then the different parts of the eye goes 1/2, 1/4, 1/8, 1/16, 1/32. Like it would just go like that to 1/64. So that's how they would measure. And also, if you look at that eye, it's an R, and the R in our pharmacy symbol with the R with the X on the bottom comes from that eye. And a lot of the medicine that came to Western culture was steeped in Egypt. Even the word pharmacy comes from Pharaoh medicine, Pharaoh magic. And so there's so much in our Western culture that is like sourced from ancient Egypt.
Yeah, we were having the conversation because I'm very rebellious, and I'm like, really, you know, something needs to, like, I need to really trust and believe in something. So I'm thinking like, you know, we're not Egyptians. Like, why do we look at, you know, Egyptian mythology? But when you think about it, like what we say, that most of the Western culture comes from Greece, and then the Greek people were so closely related to the ancient Egyptian people, and they were always, you know, interrelated and exchanging information and doing all sorts of, like philosophical discussions there. And I'm thinking, who knows, how much actually we do have from Egyptian culture. Some things are obvious, but I think many things that are kind of maybe not obvious, there's a lot of those things as well, that we don't think about.
Well, when you think about this 4,000-year-old culture, and had gone through many incarnations and many different kinds of people had power there, but the wisdom stayed the same. The religion stayed the same. There were many different little cults and little like place cults, and it all lived in harmony together. It didn't matter that some religious things in a cult center would be contradictory to some other cult center. It just didn't matter. There's this underlying kind of oneness. And this 4,000-year-old culture gets obliterated, like some of their buildings get destroyed and their wisdom gets stolen by Assyrians and Babylonians, and then the Greeks come in and they get rid of the Babylonians and they rebuild the temples that were destroyed, and they rule. That these Greek Ptolemies ruled for 300 years, and there were titles given to foreign immigrants, and the title meant in the house of Ra, because the Egyptians looked at all the world as being the house of Ra, but especially Egypt, because everywhere you went, there was Ra, the sun in the sky, and the sun ruled over all. So when the Romans came, and like when Octavian came and became Augustus, he was Empire Augustus. He came in August, and he was given the title Empire in the house of Ra. Per is house, and Ra in the house of Ra, Empire. So he's the emperor now. And this whole word means something to him that didn't mean to the Egyptians. They were like, oh, he's an immigrant of high standing. You're an immigrant of high standing. Yes. So here's this immigrant of high standing, Emperor Augustus.
Yeah.
And it was arrogant of him to think that he ruled Egypt. You're just an you're an immigrant of high standing. Egypt still was Egypt. And it didn't matter who said they owned it or who said they ruled it. Egypt was still this entity unto itself.
So can you tell me more a little bit about like this moon in Pisces card? Like, because it's such a beautiful, I hope guys you can see it. It's kind of like underwater temple. What is it, Julie? Like, can you tell us?
I wanted to make this place that was like sort of an otherworldly place, and it was ruled by these the three Thoth characters, the three baboons. And I wanted to give you the understanding of this imagination place, this place that's between worlds, and that these baboons were at the doorway and not allowing everyone to get through. And the baboon, which is kind of the god behind Pisces, is Thoth. And Thoth was the guardian of the doorway to the Duat. And he was the guardian of the doorway as a baboon because the Egyptians would see the baboons at the side of the river in the morning and at night fishing. So the baboon was the fisherman, and people would watch these animals and know when they should fish. So these animals became these wise guardians, these wise gods who taught them how to survive in ancient Egypt, in ancient times. And they were the guardians of the portal because that's when the sunrise and the sunset was happening. And that was the portal to the Duat, that wherever the sun was setting or rising was the doorway to the far world, which was the Duat. And the Duat was the span of heaven, the dark night. And
so would
that
it be
was,
like an underworld or
it was not really an underworld, it was like an other world.
other world?
Yeah. So
So
like,
if we were to say something to people of 2023 that the new moon is happening in Pisces, like in the system that you're offering in the Real Sky Astrology, like what would be the most kind of like, if you could say a couple of words, what would Pisces as a sign of this energy that the sun is rising and the new moon is happening, what would it be about?
well, it would be about, because with the baboons, you have to trick them to get past them. So there's this sort of like, you have to belong to the group in order to get into the group. You have to be acknowledged by the group to get into the group. And the whole Piscean age has kind of been like exclusive. This is my group. This is your group. It's not like you have to do something to get into the group. There's got to be some kind of initiation. And the mythology goes that you would have to prove to these baboons that you too were fishermen. You would have to name all the parts of the net in order to get through. And if you were mundane and you weren't spiritual, then you would just be a fish. You would just be caught in the nets and you would not go through to the next world. You would not go through to the Duat. You would not be allowed to enter. And so there's an exclusiveness, like not everyone is going to get into my inner circle. If I'm a Pisces, not everyone is going to get into my inner circle. I'm only going to allow the people in who are like me, because then I feel safe. I'm not going to let everyone in because I'm not safe. We don't let everyone into the Duat. We don't let everyone in. And it was a time when the Duat was meant only for the pharaoh to go through at night, and he would be fighting off terrible things so that nothing would happen to the earth culture. And then other people were allowed to go through, like priests or whatever. So for the sign of Pisces, there's still this remnant. And for the age of Pisces, there's still this remnant of discrimination, and only certain people can be in the group.
But then if we think of like, because I always see every archetype, like in tarot or in astrology, on this spectrum of plus and minus, like Pisces is not all bad, or, Aries is not all bad, and vice versa. So if you wanted to use this energy of the new moon to your benefit, like what would it be? What would it mean then?
Let's see. Well, Thoth is a magician and also a scribe. So if you want to be a magician or a scribe, then you have to learn. You have to learn to write. If you want to be a scribe, you have to learn the tricks. If you want to be a magician, you have to get the knowledge in order to access their world. So if you want to access their world, you have to get the education. You have to do the things that you need to do in order to get your foot in the door. You need to do this.
Yeah. So this is an encouragement for people to actually go deep. Yeah. Go with the intuition, imagination, like all these different ways we can access knowledge.
There's a whole world that you don't know about if you're not educated in such and such, whatever it is.
Yeah. And this is also, as you mentioned, quite a powerful timing of this new moon, because it's happening on the vernal equinox, which obviously for northern hemisphere,
waxing sun, and it's increasing light. So there's this increasing consciousness. So you might have not known about something when all of a sudden, boom, it shines light on something.
Oh,
something
that's interesting with the, the way I learned about Pisces, because sometimes, especially with maybe Neptune, which rules Pisces, traditionally it was Jupiter, but after they discovered Neptune as Neptune, that there is a lot of like secrets that can come to the surface, or a lot of stuff that maybe was kind of like, just in this not quite conscious, it's some subconsciousness. It finds its way from the depths onto the surface when you can actually start acknowledging certain things, or deepen your knowledge about certain things, or just pure learn about something totally, new. So in this case, that vernal equinox that's coming, it's quite interesting, I think, because it seems like a very powerful portal for
Yeah, I think so too.
for the fresh start and the energy. But what you're doing with the signs and how they are different, you kind of like, because you use precessions. So what I noticed, like, I don't know if anybody who's watching has this real sky astrology, but when I started reading about the signs, I noticed a little bit. I know that you are going via Egyptian mythology, but I noticed sometimes that it, like, Aries seems a little bit more like Pisces, as if the precession gave the meaning to the sign, to the previous sign a little bit more. So like the Aries is losing that kind of fiery, boasty nature to more of this kind of in between the worlds. But then when I asked you, you explained it so amazingly about the Aries. So maybe if we can speak about Aries people. I don't know if there is anybody who is Aries in the chat. Please put in comment that yes, Aries here. But then again, if you Aries in the real sky astrology.
Right, if you're an Aries in the real sky astrology. Well, I should explain a little bit, like, how I decided that these gods, belonged to the astrology signs. And I have to think back to the days before anybody was doing a circular kind of tarot, and was way back in 1998 when I started seeing, well, actually, when I was working on Ancestral Path, I started seeing a calendar, but I didn't know where the majors went, and I started looking at, because I was working with lunar astrology, and I didn't like the definition that the moon was deceptive, and I I thought that was really negative, because I felt positive about the moon and the importance of using moon cycles and things like that, even in the 90s. And yes, the moon. So what began for me as the full moon in Aquarius happening in the summertime, and I was seeing the symbolism of the star card coinciding with Aquarius, with the two jugs pouring water out. And then I was seeing the star card with the two jugs pouring water out. And then I thought, okay, if the full moon is in the summer for Aquarius, that's the same time that the Nile would flood. And then I found out that the Nile, the hieroglyph for the Nile, was a big snake surrounding a man with two jugs pouring water out, and the god Happy. The
That's
Nile,
Aquarius.
the what?
Isn't it Aquarius?
Aquarius, I mean.
A
But
man? Oh, okay.
Aquarius, right. The Nile god is Happy, and he's pouring these two jugs out on the land and the water. And you can see that he's pouring one jug on a fish, and he's pouring the other jug on a duck. And so it's the Nile flood. And as I'm doing blue moon, I'm like, okay, if this is the full moon, and I start laying out the cards, and I see, you know, where the cross quarter days should go, and which cards should go with Beltane, should go with the lovers and Samhain. And so that's kind of how I was thinking about this. And as I'm looking at the precession, and I'm looking at the symbolism of astrology, and I've just come back from Egypt, so all these gods are in my head. And I'm looking at the ram god, and I'm seeing I'm seeing Amun-Ra. I'm seeing the god who is the sun at midnight, and he's the hidden god. And it just it just hits me, and I start looking at each one of the signs, and I'm seeing all the male gods on one side of the zodiac, and I'm seeing all the symbols for the female gods on the other side of the zodiac. So all of a sudden, all of these signs that were male and female, like Pisces female, Aries male, are all male. These are all male on this side. There's the Taurus as the Apis bull, and who represents the living Osiris after Osiris is gone. And there's Aries, who's Amun-Ra, and there's Pisces, who's Thoth and the fisherman. And there's Aquarius, who's happy, and Capricorn, who is Khnum, the goat-headed god, who is the god of the Nile, and also the moon. And I'm seeing these symbols, and they're coming alive for me. And the two-headed hero villain with Horus and Set.
So would then Ophiuchus start the feminine signs?
It's kind of like both. And I feel like the snake bearer could be the mother of Imhotep, or it could be Imhotep, the wisdom bearer. And there are some people who think that the snake bearer should be Medusa.
Yeah, it's an interesting theory as well, because, you know, when you see the snake bearer, you just have dots of stars, right? So, for example, just sorry for like intrusion here, but I think it's interesting, and it's worth mentioning that, like, if you have, let's say, these constellation cards, and this is the Ophiuchus, so it's a serpent bearer, but actually what you see in the skies, you just see the stars, right? So the images are given by humans, and who mostly gave images to everything? Men. So a lot of these things, I don't know, it could be like, for example, I saw that like Arabic astrologers called Ophiuchus snake charmer. So maybe it not necessarily had to be a man.
Here's my snake bearer.
So this is from the Egyptian, from Dendera temple, right?
Right. And that is actually in that little Dendera temple, or temple ceiling. It's right above Scorpio, and it's this little.
Can you put it up a little bit, Julie?
Huh?
A little bit up, yeah.
There we go. You can see the snake is underneath him, and he's sitting on a throne.
That's very like Ark of Covenant throne,
Right?
like throne of wisdom, right? Like Isis is sitting on a similar kind of.
They actually have those things.
Throne, because it's not really like, it doesn't have like European thrones, this like back stuff, right? Like it's this.
Right. When I was at the Temple of Edfu, there was actually one of those boats. You know, there was and they call it a bark.
Yeah.
Or an ark, a bark, and it's like the shape of a crescent moon, and it has poles so that people could carry it, and a little chamber on top where they would put the statue of the god. And then there were some rituals, like in Luxor, they would take the statue of Min, they would take him and move him and carry him to the Hathor temple for a big festival, and the families would party all night long. In the middle of the night, all night long, they would party, and then at dawn they would douse the flames with milk, and the party would be over, and Min would return to the temple, and the festival would be over. So
yeah,
like there was all these symbols and all these gods that were alive, and
yeah,
they're in the zodiac.
So in your system, we said that like Aries doesn't seem like, okay, but can you say more about Aries as a sign then? Because
Aries.
we went on the digression, but it's interesting
we talked about this
before
the show. Aries is this place between death and rebirth. It's this liminal space. And he's the sun, as the sun travels through the Duat, which is the body of night. They thought that it would travel through the body of night to come to the east again and to be and be born. But during this journey, he would be confronted with all these things that would try to steal his heart. And when you're dealing with a Aries personality, they feel invisible. Aries feels invisible. So they are bigger than life. They want to do everything first. They will, they're really in touch with things that other people can't see. They will see things before other people see things. And
yeah, it's so interesting because, when you're a Western astrologer or like live in our culture, I guess, Aries is always connected more to the spring energy, just what you said, bigger than life, big fire energy, cardinal fire, go for it, ruled by Mars, as you said, right? I mean, you said it before, not right now.
I said it before the show.
Before the show, but I find it interesting because when I was reading your book, I'm thinking everything you write about Aries feels like it's Pisces, invisible. It's the 12th house, it's invisible, it's kind of dissolved. I'm thinking, how does it fit Aries when I know also Aries, and you mentioned like your grandson and like that they have big energy and they are quite like a statement, and they're not afraid to say what they think and show up. But when you put this perspective on that, maybe we see them like this, but they do these things because they might feel, consciously or not, invisible. That also it's an interesting twist to the, let's think about it. That's an interesting theory, at least. Why would you be so bigger than life, right?
Because you don't feel seen, you don't feel appreciated, and you feel overlooked. And the age of Aries was the time that we have our most history about. So BC to like almost up to the 18th dynasty of Egypt. So this is the time of all of the god kings and all of the celebrities of the past. So all the Hellenistic, everyone we know from history, from Western culture history, is from the age of Aries. They're all remembered. They're all remembered. And
so, Julie, just before we go further, just for people, if they don't know age of Aries, what does it mean? It's when the Aries constellation is rising on the vernal equinox, right? That's what's meant as age of Aries.
Yes. So all of the writings of Claudius Ptolemy and the things about astrology and astronomy that he wrote about all were written in the age of Aries, as well as the Gospels was written at the same time.
So I'm thinking that's what, sorry, just I'm like butting in, but I'm always thinking like of people who might not know, but I'm thinking that's maybe where astrology, because Western astrology kind of starts around this time when the Aries constellation rises actually on the vernal equinox. So if Ptolemy knew about precessions or he didn't, we don't know exactly, but at least like he fixed the zodiac to the tropical thing, but the Aries constellation was still rising on the vernal equinox. If he knew that it's not going to be rising a couple of 100 years, we don't know. But my point being that the Western astrology at the beginning was connected to the stars. It wasn't totally like, okay, whatever constellation is rising, we don't care. We're going to market to Aries 0 in the spring. But no, like it was rising on the vernal equinox, right? So
part of what he was writing about was he was predicting when the Piscean age would begin. And he was a librarian in 156 AD. So he projected that the Piscean age would begin in 221 AD. But even his calculations of the Earth were off. So like he calculated that the earth was round, and that it was so a certain size. And his writings were what Columbus used when he mistakenly came to the Americas thinking he was going to India based on the calculations of Claudius Ptolemy. But I mean, the translations were not so good. His translations of the Egyptian things were not so good. But at least it was something, and it did cause the Renaissance, and it did cause the world to become more global. And we make mistakes. We venture out and we make mistakes. But
Yeah. Okay, so we have kind of Aries covered a little bit, like
yes,
why you would think Aries people are so big, because maybe deep down often there is this invisibility thing, and that maybe pushes people of Aries energy to do things like their own way. They want to be seen, they want to be validated, they want to do things the way they want to do things. So what do you think about Mars ruling Aries in this
I think
kind of...
that's a very Roman thing. I think that's very, like, you can see the Roman impact that the year would begin with Mars, the air thing, because Aries was the name for Mars in Rome. So, or was it Greece? I forget which is
Yeah, I
Greece.
think Mars was...
Aries is,
yeah, one of them.
and Mars is Roman. Is that? But they're so
I think
interchangeable for me in my brain.
Aries
So
was, I think, Roman.
Aries is Roman. Well,
But I'm not...
so even when you look at the names of the months, you can see the Latin words. December
Yes.
is the 10th month, which would make March the first month. So they still had that in the names of the month, even though January 1st was the designated first day of the year decided. And I think that was because Julius Caesar was honoring Cleopatra, because Sirius is at midheaven on January 1st. And it still is, because Sirius is so accurate.
Yes,
So
Sirius can be, yeah. It's moving. I think it also moves, but it moves so slow that, like, I don't know, it's thousands
there are
of
some
years.
people that think that Sirius and our sun are binary systems. So that's, I think, another reason why Egyptians were like so keen on Sirius, and Sirius was so important in
Important,
their
yeah.
culture and their religion.
Yeah. So how about then from Aries, do you want to go to Taurus, or do you want to go to Pisces?
Either way, whatever.
Either way. So let's just go with the Taurus, because, and I'm
Taurus.
using, just for everybody in the chat, I'm using the Real Sky Astrology Tarot.
Right. Aries is the apispal, and apis is a word that belongs to bee. This belongs to bee. Apiaries are bees.
Yeah.
To do with bees, and it's symbolic of the bee and the bull, and you'll see a lot of that in Greek culture as well. And the bull is connected to the bee, in that when the bull was sacrificed to release blocked energy or feed the people or whatever, the bees were attracted to the blood, and they thought that the bees were the soul of Osiris. So it transformed from Osiris to the bull, and then from the bull to the bees. And the sound of the bees was the voice of Osiris whispering. And so there's this beautiful connection between the bee and the bull. And even the pharaoh would be signified by a bee. Like when you see a bee in hieroglyphs, that's the pharaoh.
But that's also fascinating when you think of Minoan culture, and I think even before, when, like, the the old Europe, so-called, which Maria Gimbutas did a lot of research from this perspective of Europe. It's interesting that, like, bull and the bee were very much connected to the ancient mother or the goddess, or like the feminine, and all these like figurines that were found, right? Like there was like on the vases and everything which was painted, there was a lot of this spiral energy, bee energy, bull, which was also like apparently, the horns of the bull, which are symbolic of our ovarian, like ovaries, yes. And
It's everywhere in the ancient world.
but in this system that you mentioned, bull would be the masculine, yeah?
Masculine, because it represents Osiris. Because when Osiris became the god of the dead, the bull became his representation on earth. And his connection, he was also represented by the vegetation coming up out of the ground, and anything that was springing back to life was Osiris.
And that's kind of very much our northern culture as well, because in May, when the bull kind of, at least in Western astrology, in the tropical, that would be, I'm just looking for connections between the systems as well, not only differences, that it would be like when May, everything is just like so lush and like blossoming. The green is the most beautiful, and everything, you just go out and all you feel is like life.
Right. Fresh air.
Yeah. So it's quite amazing.
Returning.
But you have it as death card in your tarot, like
as well. You can't have new life unless you have some death first. Like get rid of the old. Complete and total change. Isn't that our death card? It's complete and total change, a rebirth.
So that's not Scorpio for you then, because isn't Scorpio like, from Western perspective, Western astrologers' perspective, Scorpio would be exactly this, but Scorpio is in opposition to Taurus, so in some way they interconnected.
Full moon and not Scorpio. Full moon. There's a connection there. There's an awareness there.
Yeah.
There's this thing
definitely
that happens with these opposites, that there's an awareness there.
So again, for person, I'm just going to, Eleanor says, I've always found comfort in the moon and never liked the tarot description myself. Sorry, that's an old probably comment too, when we were talking about the moon. And Saskia is here. Hi, Saskia, nice to see you. And hi, everyone, to everyone who's joining in. So Julie, for a person in 21st century, what would the bull represent then, like astrologically, like energetically maybe, because as we were laughing, I'm like, somebody asked me, who is using the system that Julie's using? And Julie said, like, nobody's using
Nobody, just
I'm
me.
using it.
This is from nowhere. It's just my brainchild,
But
it's just a thing to think about.
I find it fascinating, and I want to think about it because it just like helps my research. So thank you, Julie, for putting it out there. But like, what would you say, like what you said about Aries, like kind of maybe more from energetic perspective, like what would a Taurus person in your system feel like?
The ability to transform themselves, to step from one reality to the next reality, no matter like how old they are. This ability to endure like incredible obstacles and then still create a new self, like step up. I'm this isn't working for me, stepping into a new reality and just making things abundant and beautiful. And the symbol of the bee, as well as the many people around them, kind of like this this person that people look to as an example or serve in some way, like the way that the worker bees kind of work in unison with the queen. They're all working together, kind of like a super organism. The bee is this super organism, and that's all reflected in Taurus as this person, this icon who draws people together and gets them to understand things, and they all kind of work together as a group.
Yeah, that's interesting here. So Patrick says that the mirror signs Taurus Scorpio makes a lot of sense. And Patrick, it's interesting because when you actually start looking deeper into this true sidereal astrology, That's what I was telling Julie, that I'm so frustrated because I'm still in this point, I think, in my life when I'm like researching and I don't want to fucking change, but I want to change because I can't do the old one anymore.
Remember that.
So Julie was there, so I'm always talking to her, going like, fuck, I don't know what I think anymore. I don't know anything. But sometimes the
That's right.
oppositions that we know, they don't really work so well. So because the constellations have a different size, so sometimes Aries is in opposition, for example, to not to Libra, but to Virgo, or sometimes Taurus is in opposition not to Scorpio, but to, I don't know, a Fucus or Virgo as well, depending on the time. And, you know, but when you actually follow these constellations, it's really crazy. And it really is such a mind fuck, to be honest. I'm sorry that I swear. I hope nobody
It's
minds
just
so
more
much.
variables. It's just more symbols to work with. It's just more details.
And it's more chaotic, I think, that the Western, that's why I say like, oh my God, Western astrology, tropical astrology is so wonderful. It's so fucking simple. Everything is
So
there.
perfect and
I can
clean.
figure, it's perfectly figured out.
Not like
It's
life, though. Life
not
is
like
not
life.
clean. Life is not easy and perfect. It doesn't just fall into place. It's not factory. It's
Yeah,
not factory. No,
it's
life
very
is will throw
funny.
you variables and
Yeah.
send you on a down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, so it's a little bit, I actually want to invite also a couple of people that I admire a lot from Western astrologers, like, you know, probably Chris Brennan won't come onto my show, but I don't know, I will ask him because I'm sure they researched every fucking possible option to check why they're using tropical. They wouldn't be one of those people who just like use tropical because, oh, it's there. They like really deep researchers, really, you know history of astrology. Like, I know nothing compared to them, and they still choose to use tropical. And there's another one, this Brett Gemini that this
Oh,
Joseph,
yes. Yes.
because he also uses the shamanic astrology from Daniel DiMario, and they watch the skies, right? They watch, actually,
Yes.
he's very involved with like
Shows
sky
are really
screen.
good.
And that's
The
why
work
I'm
it's
wondering,
out there.
so he's watching the sky, he knows what constellation the planets are in. And he still is using tropical astrology because, again, tropical is not meant, maybe it's not that it's not meant, but it's not connected to the stars or the constellations, it's connected to the seasons. But I want to ask them this question, like, how do they reconcile watching the stars and seeing what constellations they're in, and then saying that, for example, I don't know, Uranus is in Taurus, when they know, or like Uranus maybe it's not a good idea because you don't see it with naked eye, but like Mars is, let's say, in Taurus now, but for Western astrology is in Gemini. Like, how do they reconcile it? Like, how do they tweak it in their brain? Because that's, for me right now, I don't know how to do it. I'm totally lost.
I couldn't do it either. Once I knew, I just felt like I was lying. I couldn't say that. And I think I forget, it was either him or this Isaac that
Yeah, from this idea, yeah.
said that the houses are the constellations. And I was like, oh my goodness. They are the constellations. They're the mansions. They are the houses.
So
And
that the first house would be Aries house connected to Aries constellation and so on.
like wherever the constellation is, that's the house. So that kind of like really changed my mind too.
Yeah,
That
but then it would make the houses also like all the different sizes. So because now I'm using the system, so it has all the 13 constellations in the right sizes, but it uses equal houses. So we have 30 degrees for each of the house.
Well, the thing is that the planets stay where they are, regardless.
Of
You know,
what systems we use.
they're both systems. The planets are where they are. Like if it's above the horizon and you have the little planet here above the horizon, that's where the planet still is. If something's at midheaven, it's still at midheaven. And it's just a matter of interpreting the sign. And you can interpret it with the real sky. And I'm I'm not as much a measurer.
As
Like
I am.
like my husband and I, when we're doing a project, he's measuring and measuring and measuring and measuring, and it's crooked. It's still crooked. And I go, no, here, just and I get it kind of in between and balanced. And he goes, he just gives up and he goes, just do your magic. And he just walks away. And I'm like, we'll just eyeball it. Let's just lay it out and we'll eyeball it. And I'm an eyeballer. I just,
Yeah.
and I'm pretty precise. I can do things very precisely because when I look and I'm doing a portrait of someone and I look at their face and I'm painting them, it's not going to look like them if I'm even a 16th of a degree off. Like I can be just a tiny bit off and it won't look right until it's perfect. So there's
Mhm.
no measuring involved with that. That's all just looking. So that's the way that my brain works. And I can look at something and draw it exactly on the page. And so the whole idea of measuring everything precisely, that is like beyond me. Like
Mhm.
that doesn't work with me. So
But I think, like my idea was like that if I worked with Western astrology for the last 17 years,
yes.
it's very precise. I can tell somebody who comes to me for a session when the cycle starts, when it finishes, and it still works really well because, as we know, seasons always happen the way they happen. They're repetitive.
It should
So,
work with real sky too. The it should work with real sky too. What I notice is I'll be watching as, say, Venus moves into a new sign. And that moment that Venus moves into a new sign, all this stuff happens. And what I hear from the Western astrologers is that one of the asteroids is doing something. And I'm like, no, that was Venus going, that was Venus going in. No, I'm sorry. That was Venus going
oh,
in.
please leave asteroids out of it, Julie.
I know. I'm sorry. But I mean, when I started learning astrology way back in the 80s, and my astrologer started using a little bit of Chiron, and that was it. I mean, it was just the planets in the houses, in the signs. And so that is, how I learned it from her.
Yeah, I know, but like, we have
And
now all these apps and we know that the asteroids are
I
there.
know.
And they add so much, especially that they mostly like feminine in nature. They add such nice balance to all the different aspects. And you can go just minute, there's thousands of them, obviously. So I fell in love with them when I started actually learning more and like checking with people because I was into all this,
I have
goddess
no problem
research.
with everyone else using it. I have no problem. For me, I just don't need it.
Yeah.
It's just not in my world.
So I'm
But
in this place now where I want to do this. I'm doing the research, I'm checking the moon cycles based on the constellations. Obviously, I know what moon cycle, moon sign the moon is in the Western astrology because everybody is in the Western. And it's too short for me yet. Like, I don't have any conclusions that I can share with you guys. The only thing is that I'm fascinated with that when we had this moon in Aquarius, and I asked on my Instagram account, you saw it, do you guys feel more that it's moon in Pisces? Because in Western astrology, the moon was in Pisces, and in the constellations where the moon actually was going through a constellation of Aquarius, most of people said Pisces. But I felt very Aquarius then. We were chatting about all sorts of astrology stuff. I was talking all the time about, all these ideas, and definitely very much like expanding consciousness and seeing things differently, so I felt very much Aquarius. And then one of the comments said, but like Venus was in Pisces, Jupiter was in Pisces,
right, there's a
Neptune
lot
is
of
in
things going
Pisces.
on in Pisces.
A lot of energies were in Pisces, so maybe people did feel that Piscean,
Right.
kind
Because
of
Jupiter's
thing.
big.
Jupiter is
Very big.
Exactly. It's the biggest.
It is. It's big.
Oh, okay. Let me just check what Ellen says. I'm a solid Virgo in all the systems. Okay, that's a good point as well, because I want to mention that we vary from the skies, we meaning Western astrology, by around 24 degrees. Each sign has 30 degrees. So if you were born at the end of the sign, let's say your sun is 29 degrees Virgo or 26 degrees Virgo, you still, if you minus 24 from 29 or 26, you will still be in Virgo. So some people born at the end of the signs, their sign won't change. I'm born 6 degrees of Sagittarius in Western astrology. So when I subtract 24 from 6, I end up in Scorpio, or even, depending on the system, cusp of Ophiuchus for the sun. But Ellen is a solid Virgo in all of the systems, and she has the Taurus moon and rising in Western astrology. So you may well also evolutionary Ellen work on Aries energy, because if you subtract depending on this degrees, but if you go before one sign before Taurus, you would be Aries moon and Aries rising. So think about that. And then Patrick says that all the systems connect, like the threads that Hetien connects to Mary. It's better when we are open to evolution, not fixed, definitely. And Patrick says that he's with you, the asteroids.
I read
Betrayal. I just sense betrayal.
that. It's okay. I mean, it's okay.
I will
I don't-
never give up asteroids. I'm like asteroid queen. I fucking love them. I think you guys missing out, really. But okay, fine.
You're probably right. I'm probably missing out.
Stick just to your regular traditional
I gotta
7
stick to
planets,
my own
fine.
system just because that's where I'm at right now until something happens to me, then
Yeah, I told you that, like, when I went to my first astrology session, my astrologer was doing research on Chiron, and she was doing this experiential
yeah.
like bit. So I actually Chiron, and plus I have Chiron on my MC, like right there. So it's very important for me, very important. I could not imagine my life without Chiron. So definitely when I see that Chiron it's not even an asteroid, apparently it's a comet. So, but we think about it as like one of the asteroids, right? But yeah, when I started researching some of Sedna, for example, very important asteroid, when you have like some wounding around betrayal or abandonment, and very often from like father lineage, but not necessary. But the myth is about father cutting off her fingers when she holds onto the boat. So there's so many fascinating stories, and you love mythology. I cannot believe you don't
I
like
know. Well, the
asteroids.
thing is that I'm not doing charts for people.
Yeah,
I'm just doing structure. And when you're working with people, individuals, and most of that seems to be about like pieces of astrology, I mean, pieces of psychology. So that's kind of really important for your work. Those
yeah,
are the details that are important for you helping people.
yeah. You can narrow
So
it a little bit more
I can
even.
be okay with that. But when I'm working on sort of big picture things and big structure things, I don't need the minutia
Yeah.
for what I'm doing because it's kind of art and it's kind of structure and it's kind of um, I'm trying to break the barrier of um, why we do the things that we do, where things come from, sources, prehistory. I'm trying to find um, origins of humanity and just kind of break out of modern culture and see what was before to see if that's something I want to bring forward. And, that's kind of what doing. And
Yeah.
also about timing and
Yeah.
making sure that we're on time. Like making sure we're not thinking we're in because we're in the world of time. And though time doesn't exist in other worlds, we do live in a world of time. And why would I want to continue to live in the dark ages forever? I want to see what other people were doing in other time periods and if that relates. And this is a thought experiment in art. I mean, I'm doing the art and I'm doing thought experiment and it's a tarot deck. I mean, my journey into Egypt is a tarot deck. This is an oracle. And
Yeah, tell us maybe more, just like for people who maybe haven't had the old, interview, because this tapestry behind Julie is her new project she's working on, the Oracle deck.
Crazy project.
Tell us about it.
As I was finishing up the Real Sky Astrology tarot deck, and I was beginning to do YouTube interviews, I was working with Rochelle Dagley, and she had gone through my workbook and was looking at the houses and how I felt like there was a shift from one age to another. And I kind of had a little blurb about how right now, as we shift from the Piscean age to the Aquarian age, we're seeing money mixing in with physical body, like we are the money we make, we are like, we're cast in whatever, based on our income, this is who we are. It's sort of bleeding in to, and our communication has come into our home, and our, there's all this blending where we've never had the ability to speak to anyone, anywhere, in real time from our home. And there's all these things that are happening now, and I'm seeing these houses blending and merging and changing. So I was writing about that in my workbook, and she said, I would like to see more about these houses, and do they change? And I think what spurred me was I was watching a video that someone gave me about, it was an interview with John Anthony West, and he was sitting in the tomb of Tutmosis III, and he's going through the hours of the night, the 12 hours of the night, and he's describing each one of these hours, reading the hieroglyphs, and I'm seeing the houses. I'm seeing this is this and this is that, and it's shifted, and I'm seeing that the age, what I thought was the age of Taurus, was really the age of Aries, and it's shifted just a little bit. And he's talking about the age of Aries, and I can see that the houses have changed. And so I wrote about that in Real Sky briefly, like one page. And she poked at it and she said, I would like to see more of this. And I thought, wow, what if I would do some kind of a oracle where we would get the whole full 26,000 years, and we'd have this different rising sign, different 12th house, a different sign for each one of the 2,000 years. And what would that be like? So that's what I'm working on now. 432 cards with, 12 sets of 36 cards for each age and how it shifts. And it kind of looks like that. And I have a card for each one of the squares. And then it turns. So each of the 12 changes a little bit with color. So you don't see a big color change between one age to the next until you get to the quarter age or the opposing age. Then you see this complete shift in color. And so each one of the houses has a picture, and then there's moon phases inside for each of the positions. So
I don't know how you can. I lost it already. I'm thinking, shit, I don't know anymore. Everything is there. But
it's really complicated, and I didn't get this all in one big full swoop. I mean, I put it away for a year.
Yeah,
I was working on it, and I did, I think, two of the ages, and then I just put it away. Like somebody asked me to do something, and it broke my connection, and I just said, I don't have to do this, and I put it away. And then when Mercury went retrograde in January, I thought, man, I really need more moon phase cards. And I'm putting up these little things every day, and I don't have phases of the moon. I want
Mhm.
cards for the phases of the moon in the different signs. And then I thought, what if I do that for the oracle? So then I started finding places for the moon phases, and it was a need. It was a tool that I
Yeah.
needed. So
Well, I'm curious about it. It seems, but like, it seems complicated, but probably when it's finished, there will be like many different uses for it, right?
right.
Because what the ages, when I think of ages, they're so humongous. Like, what does it help me to know what the age, you
But
know?
you could use an individual age as the rising sign. So if you have a rising sign, then you would
Okay.
know what phase of the moon each,
Get it.
for that
Yeah.
rising sign would be, like where the phase.
Okay. I get it. So like
And
ascendant,
I
or
mean,
yeah. Okay, yeah, which makes sense.
yeah. So
Should we
it's,
go to the next sign then? Should we go to
yes,
Gemini?
Gemini,
I don't know
sure.
if we do all the signs, but if there are Geminis in here, then
Yeah.
yeah, that's
And
about you.
the Gemini twins for Egypt are not two males. That's very Roman. The gods were always paired off male, female. So there's both. And that's their Gemini.
Yeah, I sorry, I'm just going to add this because I'm going to invite Karni as well. I would love you and Karni to meet and just have a chat about all of this stuff, because she did this, the holistic astrology cards. I showed you this before.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's exactly what she says about Gemini, that it used to be female and male.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that makes such perfect sense. Like,
Yeah. Because the Egyptians always had to have balance. They always had to have both. They had to have, you know, they couldn't just have it be lopsided with, you know, yeah. So all the gods are paired off, even though you might not hear about, the other half very much, but they're all paired off. And so I did like an Isis and Osiris kind of thing, because that's the most prominent, and you're just coming off of Taurus and Orion and Sirius being on below the ecliptic, and then you jump right into Gemini. And it's also the time of the year when there's 5 extra days when the gods are born. So there's 5 days that don't fit into this 360-day year that the Egyptians have. So you have the birth of Osiris and Isis and Nephthys and Set and the elder Horus. So these are the
okay.
five gods that are born in the 5 days, and it's all celebrated, and then they have a new year.
Yeah, so that's nicely fits into the lovers kind of archetype. And
Yeah.
even if people are, in same-sex relationship, it doesn't really matter, because you can always see this as a feminine and masculine, which we each have within ourselves anyway.
And the whole definition is we have more things the same than different. It's a card of solidarity, and there's more the same than different.
So like
And
looking for similarities rather than differences.
and so these people will have masculine and feminine tendencies in their regular life. They will, not be, they could be either or. They switch. Can switch between whatever gender they feel like they want to be in. And that would be normally the Cancer people, but in Western astrology. But
I would think of Gemini more, actually.
yeah.
But would you connect then in your system, would you connect the Gemini to Mercury as well, that it's ruled by Mercury, or you skipped those rulerships?
Keep the rulerships kind of like out of it. That isn't really like part of this. It's just,
That came later.
yeah, there's no ruling.
Okay, so then we have this fascinating
Yeah.
Cancer, which is
And
the scarab.
this is my first time ever thinking of Cancer as the chariot. And in other decks, I always had the chariot as Leo moon, or, something with Leo. And I actually woke up from a dream with the scarab pushing Khepre, the god Khepre, who is self-born, pushing this sun across the sky. And I'm like, no wonder they called it a chariot, because it was like Apollo or Diana pushing a heavenly body across the sky. And I had my aha moment, and then I had to go back and look at all the traditional things to see if I'm missing anything, that I forgot, if I had gotten anything wrong. And
So that gives Cancer, that's why I understand why Cancer is cardinal in Western astrology, because sometimes it doesn't fit when you hear the Western kind of pop astrology about Cancer, they just like being at home and they so family oriented and and I'm like, it's cardinal water. Like it has a bite to it, like it wants to like get things done, and it's not like just all mothers and fathers staying at home and cooking dinners.
right. Oh,
And actually, yeah, go.
So the dung beetle is pushing the dung ball, and it's like a dung ball, and its young are inside of that dung ball, and they feed on, and they're composters, so they're feeding on that. So it's pushing this ball, and they really do push this little dung ball around. And so there's this, mythology of this self-born scarab that comes out, and it's a creator god who is like, it is part of the sunrise symbology, symbolically. So it's like neither gender. It's self-born, so it doesn't have a mother, and it is just born out of the dung ball. And
So are you suggesting that Cancers are born out of shit?
oh, what's interesting is that they would put a scarab on the heart of the deceased to protect it. So the scarab is like the protector of this very important sun, this solar deity that crosses the sky.
But how interesting, because I read somewhere, from Western perspective, but I read somewhere that Cancer people are often found, I think I shared it with you maybe before, like in police or army as soldiers, as policemen, that they will kill for you to protect what they love. Kill in quotation like marks, not necessarily kill, but they would go to fucking ends of shit to like protect their family, protect their communities, protect their projects. If they love it, Cancers are kind of like dangerous.
You want
Don't
something
fuck with them.
done, give the job to a Cancer.
Yeah, so that's interesting, because that's not really in Western astrology or pop astrology, I should say, what you actually think of Cancers. Usually they feel like, motherly, generous, they feed you, they like, and I think always like it never really sat well with me.
Yeah.
And now I'm trying to find like the new vistas for Cancer, because in true sidereal astrology, I have Cancer ascendant, which I just went like, no.
No, you get things done. You get things done.
In Carney's holistic astrology, she gives Cancer like the realm of giving, and she says this is actually energy that's connected to teachers, which I've never heard before, but it's about giving and sharing what you learned with others, what you've experienced, can you give it to others. So that's pretty cool also how she sees it, because she renamed but she uses 12 signs, but she renamed all the signs of the zodiac and gave them like realms. So they're not like flat, they're not finished on 3D. So that's pretty cool as well.
Yeah.
So for Cancer, we just say to Cancers that like you can do stuff, and if you love it,
you are the inventors. You are getting the job done. You get the job done. You keep things moving.
Saskia is asking what deck is this. This is, I think if you mean this one, this is the Real Sky Astrology Tarot. It's the new tarot by yours only, Julie Cuccia-Watts. You can get it, Saskia, on Printer Studio.
Offering.
Yeah. So you can get it from Printer Studio. It comes in the, like white box.
White box.
That's how it looks.
Economic reasons.
It looks beautiful though. It's really.
I could have put it in a fancy box, but who keeps the box?
Yeah, the box does the, and we all have bags anyway. Okay, so this is Cancer. Let's move to Leo and slowly.
Yes. So Leo is Sekhmet.
So this is Sekhmet after she was pacified, yes?
She's sort of in transition. It's actually Sekhmet, and it's kind of the story of Sekhmet. And you see Thoth in the corner, and you see the transformation into Hathor. But the story goes that Sekhmet was the daughter of Ra, and she was sent out to explore the deepest darkness by Ra. And she had been gone for so long that by the time she got back, he had grown back a new eye, like she was the eye of Ra. And by the time she got back, he had grown a new eye, and she felt like nobody needed her, and she was like really angry. And then there's some other stories that say she was angry because people were disrespecting her father Ra. So I think if you're thinking of the sun as a dung ball, she may have been upset that people thought of the sun as a dung ball. And she's also symbolic of the very hot sun of Egypt, when it's, the direct sun is kind of dangerous in Egypt.
Mhm.
And so there was a story where she was on a killing spree and no one could stop her. And every day she'd be lapping up the blood and she'd be killing more people. And Thoth found a way to trick her by making a puddle of red beer. And so when she drank the beer, she went to sleep. And when she woke up, then she became the beautiful Hathor and transformed into Hathor, the goddess of attraction, which is also Virgo. In the temple of Dindira ceiling, Virgo holds the sistrum, and that's an accessory for Hathor. She holds the sistrum, and the sistrum breaks up clogged, blocked energy. And Virgo is quite long. She's like a high priestess and the divine feminine. And I think that when you're looking at these signs from Sekhmet all the way through Scorpio, you're dealing with all these fragments of the Wadjet, the snake, facets of the feminine goddess. They're
So
all
for
little pieces of the divine feminine.
So for Leo, do we have any like snippet of wisdom to just 1-2 sentences for regular humans?
For regular humans, I think Leos can also feel like they don't get enough attention, kind of like Aries, and they have a very strong presence, and they have a very strong ability to do whatever's needed, and maybe they're not as appreciated as they should be. But they're like deep, and they go far, and they, people don't always see how deep they've gone.
So based on the mythology, would there be also this connection to like if you're not appreciated, that you would turn angry or like
Right.
work with anger
Like
this lifetime as well?
anger management, maybe too dependent on, someone else's approval.
Yeah. All right, so maybe let's finish on Virgo, and maybe we can catch up next time for the rest of the signs, because I think we've been on for definitely over an hour. But
Hour and a half. Plus,
yeah,
we're talking
so
for an hour
let's finish with Virgo. Virgo is actually in the 13th sign of astrology. I think a lot of people will have quite a lot of planet in Virgo.
Yeah, a
because
lot of people will have Virgo, and Virgo is this, Hathor, the cow goddess, and she is the goddess of attraction, and she's also the wife of Horus. And her tool is the sistrum, which breaks up energy, and
the sistrum.
Yeah, the sistrum, and the creature behind her is Seth, and he is holding this shank of meat. So I think it's symbolic of the masculine priesthood that would have been part of the dismembering of Osiris.
Oh,
So kind of a shamanic dismemberment, and that they worked together, but he's kind of behind her. So she's kind of like the dominant, um, the dominant character of the sign. But he's
maybe.
always with her in all of the pictures of Virgo in Dendera, like even on the walls, he's always there. And it seems like it's part of the Sed festival, which would have been um, like the Jubilee for the Pharaoh. He would have to go through some kind of physical um, requirements to see if he was worthy of being Pharaoh. And
Mhm.
she would have been the facilitator of that. So, like,
Oh, that's interesting. I never noticed that meat, but I can see it. It feels like she's doing like the purification, which suits Virgo even from the Western
right,
perspective. And
right,
he's bringing in that like dismemberment, like from shamanic perspective, right?
right,
There's like this
exactly,
calling your
right.
lost pieces and something that kind of like makes sense as well. And Virgo constellation, I end up having the moon, Venus, Pluto,
Yeah,
and I think Uranus maybe in Virgo.
yeah. So
Bit
all of that
crazy.
breaking the blocked energy. You want to get through those barriers, get through the blockages, and
And I also love seeing Virgo, like for Virgo people that like a ritual soothes us. And like if you have planets in Virgo, or you are in Virgo, or you have an ascendant or whatever in Virgo, that like doing a ritual, doing any type of devotional practice, if it's to nature of any deity, whatever, rocks your boat, um, that's soothing energy for a Virgo, that there is maybe this deep memory of this priestessing type of things that it gets, somehow like stored in the body memory here. I'm just curious. Like I ended
not
up with
everybody
such
wants to
different.
be the one facilitating the ritual. Not everybody wants to do that. Not everybody wants to
Yeah,
be.
but I don't even mean it in the sense of like facilitating rituals for others, but like doing it for yourself, like in your privacy of a home, even if you make drinking a coffee a little ritual, when you add a little bit of devotional meaning, like you have intention there that this is your moment, this is a moment of like presence, or when you just fucking drink your coffee and you enjoy all the flavors that hits in your mouth. That's more
Virgos
on
don't
the
have
what
a
I'm.
problem with being by themselves. They don't have a problem with alone time.
Yeah, it's just like interesting to look at this images that you pick, but this piece of meat, that's kind of funny.
I know. Well, it's in the hieroglyph. It's in the Dindira hieroglyph.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's always
I don't
there.
know. Should we do one more? How do you feel, Julie? Because you,
I'm good. I
yeah.
don't have anything else to do today. I'm
Oh my
good.
God, like I want to finish. Oh fucking let's go for it. Like I don't like, yeah, I'm like, I want to know about Scorpio. I'm a Scorpio now.
Yeah.
So, but we know on Libra. So
Only-
I don't know if I told you, but your Libra your Libra card from Ma'at Tarot, it's my favorite justice card of
Yeah.
like because you made her smiley and like so
Lighthearted.
alive. And I always felt like, in Western astrology, I have a lot of planets in Libra. So all this moon, Venus, and all of this I had now in Virgo was in Libra. And I always felt this justice like kind of boring. And I'm thinking, for fuck's sake, like, ugh, give me life. And then I saw your card and I'm thinking, oh yeah, I can dig this, this one is quite
It's about
interesting.
the light heart, the lighthearted. Like, you have to keep your heart light. You can't, it's like if you tell yourself a lie, and how does that feel? And then if you tell yourself the truth, or you get excited about something new, that makes you lighthearted, and that's the balance. And we talked about this there, what is balance? And it's like momentary.
Yeah.
Because it's so loose, and it's just a momentary thing, balance.
Yeah, I guess that's why you have that beautiful imagery of a feather, because how balanced can you be with a feather? It's such a like ephemeral nearly
Right. How do you keep your
process,
heart
right? Yeah.
light as a feather? And that is the goddess Mahat, and she is she's more of a concept of universal balance, like the laws of the universe is that there will be balance. And so she's a very old goddess, and she always has a feather with her, and that's her feather that goes on the scale way against the heart. And
Yeah, yeah.
Thoth is there to witness the balance. And
Yeah,
that's
I'm just going to say, because I think it's very long for people to like be on it for all this time. So thank you, Ellen,
come
and
on
thanks,
back later if you want to.
Patrick. Yeah, people can rewatch it. I know it's a big stretch of life now to take like 2 hours.
Right. You might have a life outside of this.
Yeah, exactly. And good on you guys. We're happy for you. That's how it should be.
Yeah, no,
So we are going to keep going because that's our life. That's what we do now. We like it.
you can come back later.
You can guys watch it later. Okay, so for that basically answers the question, but what's this image from? Where is it from? Did you just, is it from somewhere, or did you just like, is it your imagination, or is it some temple?
And there's pieces that are from authentic walls, and then I just pieced it together because this was the first deck that I did digitally, where I just took pictures from my other paintings, and I have quite a body of work from way back, even before Ancestral Path. I had a body of work, and so I have all these files of, and so instead, and because I was babysitting my grandchildren, and I didn't want to have oil paints out and have to put them away when they would come over, I decided to do everything digital. And so I would take a piece from a picture and I would play with it.
Yeah, I
So
noticed a couple of images
now I
similar
paint
to.
on Photoshop.
Yeah, not some of the images were a little bit taken from like Maat, like not the whole image,
Right.
but like some of the
Right. Just a
Empress maybe,
piece.
or the, yeah.
Like if I have a piece that I need, I'll
Yeah.
take it and morph it and, you know, make it clearer or better. Or
So for Libra people, they basically would be working on like balance, or more on
it
the
could be
this
law.
true.
It could
This,
be law. It could be, you know, justice, like keeping yourself in a place of not getting caught into things that make you feel, you know, heavy-hearted.
yeah,
So, you know, make your decisions based on how they make you feel.
yeah.
Like
And that's
I want to,
interesting.
because I'm inspired, you know.
Yeah. And you know, for Libra, sometimes it's a difficult decision because that's an air sign, right? So sometimes it's too much. Like the lesson would be to take from Aries, where you kind of maybe have a bit more instinct rather than constantly, you know, weighing those pros and cons.
How does it
So
affect everyone else? Will I feel bad if everyone else doesn't, if I make this decision and everyone else isn't happy about it, will I feel bad? So
exactly.
there's a lot of deciding.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So Scorpio rules, I mean, share space with the serpent bearer. So we're going to use 15 constellations. So we can call them in this case 15 signs. So Scorpio is part of
Selkut, the goddess Selkut was a goddess who protected Isis, and she was the scorpion goddess. Um, and I find out, you know, even now, scorpion venom is used for all kinds of medicinal things. And
yeah.
yeah, it's used in like multitude. I had no idea. I looked it all up to
In
see.
Asia, when I went to, sorry, like Cambodia or Laos, like they actually like really sell it at the markets. You can use it like they use it like
Yeah,
normal.
there's pharmaceuticals now, even in Western culture, that use venom from scorpions. And so you know that they were using them back then. And the the priests of Selkut were wise in the knowledge of poisons and antidotes. And that was their main thing. So we have this little bit of Scorpio, and it's only for the healers. It's only for a select few people who have this ability to heal and to use the poison as a healing technique.
Oh, and would you use this to use the poison as a healing technique? We can look at it symbolically as well, not
Right.
necessarily.
Right. Like a vaccine would take a small bit of the poison
Yeah.
and expose you to it so that you become immune
Yeah.
and are able to be healthy.
So this became my sun sign, when I in through sidereal astrology. And again, depending on the dates used, I could be on the cusp with Ophiuchus, but 29th of
You're the
November.
second person who is a real sky Scorpio that I know who does charts for people and does real
Oh,
sky charts. So
oh, see,
yeah.
we're using poison.
We'll take this
As
poison,
medicine.
we'll make it into medicine.
So yeah, so how do you for anyone who is a Scorpio in the through
These
sidereal
are
or in Western, how
very
do you see?
special people, a unique people who do healing work and, may, feel like they can expose themselves to whatever in order to, you know, be healed. Like, not
So
afraid.
so would you say that like in Western astrology, Scorpio is often connected, to like loss or release, letting go, like this intense emotions? Would that be also in your understanding of it, that like sometimes Scorpio people are faced with quite like intense situations, or not to say difficult situations, but to like with poison to learn how to use it as a
This
medicine?
Scorpios that I know who are born in this little area have this ability to not be affected by really negative things that come at them. And like I'm amazed that most people would just be crushed and and not be able to handle that kind of stuff coming at them. But they're just like, I'm a happy person and I'm gonna, I'm doing my own thing and I'm happy.
Yeah.
And I, I'm whoa, how did you take that? I would have been like devastated by that.
Mm.
So I'm like,
Okay. So
some of my best friends are
I
Scorpios.
don't feel like I'm this kind of energy, but I admire that energy and I would like to learn it if I'm but I'm a newly born Scorpio, I'm usually a
You're brand new.
Sagittarius. So that's interesting. Okay, so Scorpio. So how is it different from that Ophiuchus serpent bearer? Like in energy?
Well, I feel like they're the ones who carry this wisdom. Like they carry a wisdom and they've been sort of um, responsible for something that they have to pass on. Like they have to give it to someone else.
So
Like,
this would be your teacher's card if you were to choose? I mean, like teacher's sign, the serpent bearer?
yeah, or maybe even like a higher education kind of person. Like, I don't know. Yeah,
Mm.
like they have this big responsibility that they have to bring this information to Earth soon.
Yeah. In the description box, I'm going to use the dates for the 13 signs so people can check for themselves. I don't know which one I'm going to put. Oh my God, which one should I put?
You're on the spot now.
Man, so wrong. You know that whenever I read any of your decks, I feel like Julie doesn't like Sagittarians.
No, I have, no, that's not true. Well, they're
There's
heroes
always the like weird
also be
stuff like,
villains. Yeah, the heroes and villains, like
yeah.
uh, the Sagittarius. I have questions about this sign because I don't think it's as old as the other ones. I think this was sort of post age of Taurus. I think it came after the age of Taurus because for one thing, there were no horses in Egypt until after the 17th dynasty. So until the very end of the age of Taurus. They didn't have horses. So I think this is kind of a Hellenistic implant.
And
And
so,
there might have been something more.
so what is it here? Is it
There's a Sagittarius, but of course this temple was built by Greeks. So
okay.
did
So
they
it's
put their
already
own, did they put their own design in there? Because I just, I don't think that they would have had this warrior. They wouldn't have wanted this warrior, dualistic warrior, to keep coming back. Like, this is a misinterpretation of the Zodiac. They would not have wanted the insurgent and the hero, icon, to keep coming back. And the symbolism is one person's insurgent is another person's hero. And I don't think the ancients would have wanted that to come back.
What
So
if this was like a Chiron?
see, it seems more like a Chiron, but they always say it's projecting into the future. It's projecting into the future. But I have questions about it because, a centaur seems so Hellenistic and a winged horse seems so Hellenistic. And I don't think it's as ancient. And I'm thinking that maybe it was more like a vulture at one point. I'm getting the feeling like the vulture goddess might have been there and
Oh.
someone inserted this masculine
Yeah,
hero.
because again, these are just groupings of stars. We
That's
don't
right.
know exactly,
We don't know, because there was a huge uptick in patriarchy from the age of Taurus on,
Exactly.
and the influence of the Babylonians and the influence of the Ptolemies and the Greeks. And I feel like that screams Hellenistic. And I think the ancient Africans would have had the goddess of the Upper Nile, the vulture goddess, Nekabet. I think it would have been Nekabet. And so when I'm doing my oracle deck and going back in time, I do include Nekabet instead of Sag. But I can still call the whole thing Sagittarius.
I like vulture idea. I kind of
I
feel
like vulture too, because it's the cleanup crew.
What about Aminat's deck? Do you remember which goddess was connected to vulture?
I don't remember the name. I only remember the Egyptian name. Look it up.
Just one sec. Because somehow I felt like, it was, who knows, maybe it also somehow connects, and ancient Egyptians and Africa. I think the vulture was connected to, was it Oshun or
Yeah, it was Anamat's deck and
the vulture never
Göbekli
died?
Tepe stones that had a Scorpio, and then they had a vulture on the stone. And I was like, why isn't there a vulture on the Zodiac? And I
Yeah.
felt like the
Well,
vulture needed to go in.
she only writes here that, I'm just checking, this
The
card.
vulture doesn't attack, and the vulture is for sanitation. And what a beautiful symbol to close off, the last of the feminine signs. And then you're
Yeah.
on to the masculine signs. She's the cleanup crew.
Yeah. She says here breaks down defenses. And Igun represents assistance from a high place. So Igun the vulture is a symbol of Iami and is thought to be a great priest turned bird.
Yeah, I like that.
And then great priest also somehow, the Sagittarius also is like this preacher. So where does the Western astrology take it from? Like it had to come from something.
Where did it come from?
And it's connected to the 9th house of higher education and philosophy and all this beyond, what's beyond. So I kind of like it that it's Igun appears, she never attacks. They simply help nature by feasting on dead corpses. Blue is the color of communication, So that's a symbol for EME.
Yeah.
I mean, what am I holding? Yeah.
I think that vulture probably would have helped people survive, and they would have wanted her to come back.
Very fascinating. I like this, Julie. That feels good. If I was,
I know it does feel good.
If I was an eyeballer, but I'm the measurer, I would go for it.
Well, I'm an eyeballer, so I know
Exactly.
I can do what I want.
Woohoo!
Doing what I want.
What about Capricorn?
And
We have
Capricorn is
two more.
Khnum, the goat-headed god who I've been to his temple at not Philae, Elephantine. It's a beautiful island, and it was a retreat for pharaohs. They would go there, and also it was the settlement of a Jewish settlement there, where the synagogue was, where when Jesus ran away when he was 12 and was found in the synagogue. I was in there. It was there. It was there on that island in Elephantine. So he is the potter who makes people on a potter's wheel. And I think of the old stories in the Bible about God making people from dust. And and Khnum is making people from clay. And these two stories are only about a stone's throw away from each other in culture. The cultures are on the same island. And Khnum is this guide to Ra. He teaches Ra how to navigate the Duat, and he's the guide for the sun. He's a
You
guide.
know, I just say this story quickly that I told you about this friend of mine who is an Aquarius in Western astrology. And when I checked her sidereal astrology, I'm like, you a Capricorn? And she's like, oh, nah, I don't want to be a Capricorn. I'm not a Capricorn. And then I started reading, the information that you share in your workbook in the Real Sky Astrology Tarot on Capricorn, and you mentioned these things about Khnum, and she knew about it. She also been to this island, and she said, like, there's seriously so much pottery on the ground, like it's
Yes, there
amazing.
is. There's some. I wanted to take a piece, but I mean, it's solid shards of beautiful colors. And I thought, no, I'm not going to take a piece. I shouldn't take a piece.
Wow,
But there's still potter's wheels leaning up against places. And
amazing. And after I read it to her, she's like, I quite like Capricorn. So what could we say about Capricorn people, Julie? That
they have the ability to guide people through uncharted territory, and they have the ability to say, I have experience with this, and so when I'm in a new situation, when I see something, I can go back to what I already knew, and I can use that in to navigate this new area. And
that's really cool. So different. But that's the whole story about, like, Saturn being feminine or Capricorn being feminine sign. Like, it's always kind of when you think of Western pop take on Capricorn,
right.
because, you have
boy, girl order. No.
And yeah, exactly. Like ambition, work. That's all that's Capricorn.
Well,
Like,
it's the heights and the depths in the old way of looking at it, because the goat is high on the mountain and the fish is low on the ground. But the fish is really symbolic of the Nile, as part of the Nile, right? And then this goat with the wavy horns is actually an extinct kind of goat. And whoops, there goes my an extinct kind of goat, and its horns were symbolic of the Nile with the waves.
So like more like this ones.
Yeah, and he is a god of the moon. So when the sun didn't know how to navigate, the moon showed him the way. So the Khnum was the moon, and said, okay, this is how you cross through the night sky. And the sun went, oh, okay, I know how to do that.
So in a way that kind of fits the Capricorns, because they are meant like to be leaders as well, at least in those pop astrology, right? So in this case, we could like do a correlation, but it's so much deeper. But that combination of the goat and the...
It seems like a really weird symbol, right?
Yeah.
When you look at it through the symbolism of Khnum, it makes complete sense.
Yeah.
It's one of those, oh my God, that's Khnum. I know that. I know
So
him.
all right, so Capricorns, here you go. All right, so we have Aquarius now. You
Aquarius
mentioned a
is,
little bit.
this kind of like my first thing that kind of inspired me to do Blue Moon was this star card. And when I was learning tarot way back in the 80s, my teacher said, the star is Sirius. And then I, went into all of the interest in, symbolism of Sirius. And so there's this timing that happens like every year when Sirius rises or when Sirius disappears, the Nile floods. It's like the tear of Isis, and then the Nile floods. And Happy is the Nile, and Happy is the guy holding the two jugs, and that is exactly what the hieroglyph looks like.
So
Is
why
this,
does he have boobs?
well, because I think he's a much older god. Like there's some really old African gods from way south, that there are other gods that may have been feminine to begin with. And I think that, in fact, if I go back to the suppressed archives, I think there were another name for Happy was I can't remember the name,
Capiana.
but it was a feminine god from
Yeah.
Africa, from much farther south. But Happy is a variation of Osiris. And so when the Nile would flood, that was a signal that uh, Osiris was still alive, but not in his form. And of course, Osiris was floating down the Nile to Byblos.
Yeah.
And so that was a very early settlement. Byblos was a very early settlement. So there's
So
history hidden in those symbols of those
so
old
for Aquarius people, 21st century.
timing. Timing is everything. And part of the whole Aquarian age is no more stockpiling, because you're going to get what you need when you need it. There's no more need to stockpile and have all this extra wealth, because there's abundance if we just all share. And it's kind of this, you're going to get what you need when you need it, so don't worry about it. The universe has your back. And that's kind of how the Egyptians viewed this whole symbol of the star and the Nile, is that just when they thought the land was going to go back to desert, there was the flood and everything was washed clean, and the ground was fertilized with the water, the silt from the river, and everything, everything is, the universe is always on time.
Yeah.
And
So this is the constellation of Aquarius with the stars, yes?
Yeah.
But Sirius seems so fascinating. I think we should meet up one time and talk only about Sirius.
just Sirius. Yeah.
That's serious.
Very serious.
Okay, so we finish with Pisces.
Pisces. And Pisces are the baboons of the morning and the evening, who are fishing, and the symbolism for the Piscean age, the symbolism for the religion of the Piscean age. And I looked at these fish and these baboons in the picture, and thought about, the fishers of men. I will make you fishers of men. And it felt so symbolic of the the these three baboons who, you couldn't get past. If you could get past them, then you'd be in. But if you couldn't, they were the magicians, and they might not let you go past the door. And
Yeah.
they're they're the first creatures that you meet after you cross over, like, into the next world.
Like, I don't personally have any associations with baboons, because obviously they're not
They're not here.
around me and they've never been. So kind of when I look at them, I don't really relate so well to this card, like it doesn't.
Right? The baboons. I really like them because
Yeah.
there's this beautiful poem that is in Normandy Ellis's book, The Awakening Osiris. And we were all in Karnak, and she read her poem while we stood around this artificial lake. And she talked about the baboons of the morning, and they were the first ones to get up in the morning. And they would sing and make noises and wake up all the people. And they would be fishing in the morning. So they were the guardians of the dawn, and they were the guardians at night as well when they would come back and go fishing. And the humans might not want to get up, but the baboons were already up. They were hungry and they were going to go fishing.
So could we say, comparing it to the Western Pisces, that they had like awareness of something, like I don't want to say something bigger, but like they kind of knew the cycles before the humans.
Right.
Cycles.
They were, enmeshed in their environment, and I would think they would be intimidating. But they were thought of as being wise and guardians. And the other form of Thoth is the ibis-headed god, who he's also a scribe, the scribe of the gods. So he has these two forms, which is really unusual. But I guess when you're a god, you can be any shape you want to be.
Yeah. Well, this baboon, I've got to. Yeah, I don't feel the connection to baboons. Sometimes I look at them and I'm thinking, that's tough.
Yeah. And and a group of baboons is called a congress.
Ooh. Oh, very political.
I know. And I thought, why did they call these things a congress? If they were maybe magicians, maybe they knew the secret, the secrets of these, magical societies, these men's groups of magical societies who knew all these, who could read Latin and who could read Greek. And that was only for the men who went to college, that they were able to read all of these old texts.
Yes. While
And
women couldn't
part
even.
of that old boys club that the girls were never invited to, because we weren't allowed to go to school in most of the age of Pisces.
Yeah. So a couple of words for the Pisces people now. Don't become baboons.
Discerning who can be in their group and who can't be, like
discerning. Yeah.
Very discerning in who they allow in, and they have got criteria for who they will allow in their group.
But so that also fits the Western kind of Pisces, because it's often a lesson of healthy boundaries, or,
True.
knowing
The
like,
positive side.
victim versus rescuer, or, I have to help everybody or let everybody in, and nobody lets me in. And this whole kind of cycle of.
It could also be like a huckster too. I mean, somebody who, can play the crowd, wear the right clothes and play the crowd.
Yeah, totally, because they're also very intuitive, right? They have this sense of this bigger cycles, like what the baboons knew before the humans knew. I think we also say in Western astrology that the Pisces can tune in into this collective unconscious, and these people have this intuition, like even without totally realizing it, maybe like tapping into that zeitgeist, and maybe in artistic way or whatever way they know how to express it in some way. So that's also kind of cool. Like the baboons were making noises and expressing shit. Wake up now. Wow. Okay, Julie, we've done a lot of talking. We've finished.
I'll be hoarse for the rest of the day.
But I'm sure we catch up again, because there's serious and all the other shit.
Questions.
Yeah. Are there any questions? I think we have 10 people. Poor people, they stayed with us. Whoever stayed, oh my God, thank you guys. Enjoy.
Yeah, thanks for hanging in here,
everyone. Yeah, Peter said it's a fascinating back and forth. Thanks
it's
for
111 here right now.
Yeah. Oh, it's 7:11. No,
Yeah,
7:11.
1:11 here.
Yeah, 7 p.m. here. So thank you everyone for watching. Whoever is rewatching, I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, please put it into the comments and we try to answer them. And I'm going to put into the links below where you can get the decks. So the Journey into Egypt and this Real Astrology tarot deck by Julie. And yeah, just put it in the comment and tell us what you think. Do you agree with Julie or not?
Just
Do you
crazy.
agree with the 13 constellations, or are you stuck totally? You love the Western astrology and that's it? Like, what do you think? We would love to know. Okay, so thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Julie, so much for being so generous with your time and knowledge. And I see you another time.